In this recording, I'm going to try to cover all 100 slides. I believe I cover all the tissues that we mentioned in lecture, which you're responsible for in this slideshow, at least twice for each tissue. If you have any questions, let me know. And I want to mention that I try to randomize these as much as possible, but occasionally there may be some slides, consecutive slides showing the same type of tissue. Okay, let's begin. And by the way, I'm going to go pretty fast because I already covered some of these slides in lecture. And also there are 100 slides to go through. I hope I can do it before my voice gives out. Okay. Now if I say something like simple squamous, you should still understand that you are still responsible for putting the epithelium on test. Okay, simple squamous epithelium. Okay. Now let's begin. This is transitional epithelium, which we already talked about in class, this part. Okay. So for each of these images, you should be able to identify the tissue, whether it's field of view or end of pointer. And then you should be able to identify the major structures or cells or fiber types. Okay, that whether the arrow is pointing to it or if you're asked to state the predominant type of cell or the predominant type of fiber. Okay, and you should be able to name at least one location where that type of tissue can be found. Okay, I think there's only there are very few functional questions, so this is the majority of the type of questions are identify the tissue, identify the features related to it, and also name one location where that tissue can be found. This one, okay, this has got a number of things in there. This is the hair follicle. Okay, you can see the epithelial tissue here. These are the sebaceous glands that are associated with the hair follicle. Okay, this is the arrector pili, and here we can see the dense irregular connective tissue with the collagen and the fibroblasts in there. This transitional epithelium, this is elastic tissue, elastic connective tissue. Here you can see the elastic fibers, the wavy elastic fibers. Okay, this is fibrocartilage. You can see the streaky collagen fibers. Okay, with chondrocytes in lacunae. This is skeletal muscle demonstrating striation and also multinucleated. Okay, those are some key features, and then you see that these are giant cylindrical cells. Okay, look like cigars. Okay, so this is fibrocartilage. Once again, you can see the collagen and then the chondrocytes in lacunae. This is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. You don't see the keratin on top. This is dense regular connective tissue with the collagen. Okay, so collagen is the predominant type of fiber in there, and these are fibroblast nuclei of fibroblast. This is another picture showing dense regular connective tissue. And if you contrast these two, because when I was a student, I remember thinking, oh, sometimes it can be actually pretty hard at that time for me to tell the difference between skeletal muscle and dense regular connective tissue. Okay, but if they're ever hard to tell apart, you have to use your knowledge on their key features to differentiate between them. Okay, well, so this is a connective tissue. This is the muscle tissue, right? And you're not going to see striations in dense regular connective tissue. That's one. Okay. Two, remember that these skeletal muscle cells are multinucleated. You can see at their margin there are numerous nuclei associated with each cell. Okay, finally, if you see these waviness to it, oftentimes this is more indicative of dense regular dense regular connective tissue. Okay, but after all, these two type of tissues are oftentimes closely associated, right? Because skeletal muscle oftentimes attached to bone through tendon. Okay. Now moving on, this is dense irregular connective tissue with fibroblast nuclei, and then we have collagen fibers running in different directions. This one, we've got simple squamous epithelium making up the Bowman's capsule. Okay, and then there's actually a simple squamous epithelium here making up the glomerulus as well. So this structure together is known as the renal corpuscle. Okay. And I showed the image of nephron in class, so you can Google nephron to look up the review the structure again. Okay, this renal corpuscle then continue into the renal tubules, also known as kidney tubules. So these sections are probably interconnected, continuous with one another actually. They're just coming in and out of the plane. So you can see that kidney, okay, you've got a lot of different types of tissue. At least within this image, you can already see two types. You can see the simple squamous epithelium, you can see the simple cuboidal epithelium. The renal tubules made up of simple cuboidal epithelium. This is adipose tissue, a type of loose connective tissue. You can see the adipocytes. Okay. This is simple squamous epithelium. You can actually see a few red blood cells in here. So this type of tissue is good for diffusion. This specific one is taken from air sacs or alveoli. This one is simple cuboidal epithelium. This one is specifically taken from the thyroid. This one is blood. I don't have too many blood slides in here because I don't require you guys to know much besides be able to identify white blood cells, leukocytes, versus erythrocytes, which are red blood cells. Okay. And then in the next unit, we'll talk about specific types of white blood cells. Okay. So this is just blood. This blood would be the type of tissue, right? It's a type of connective tissue. But you could just say blood if you're asked to identify the type of tissue. And then for this, you would just say leukocyte, leukocyte, leukocyte. Okay. This would be erythrocyte. Okay, this one is dense irregular connective tissue. You can see the fibroblasts running in different directions. Not fibroblasts, collagen running in different directions. These are the thick pinkish strands. And then fibroblast nuclei. This is areolar connective tissue. Loose areolar connective tissue. Either is fine. Here you can see the elastic fibers. Collagen fibers are the thick pink ones. And then most of these are nuclei of fibroblasts. This one is not skeletal muscle. You can see the branching pattern to it. So this one is cardiac muscle. Okay, so cardiac muscle. And these are the intercalated discs. Cardiac muscles are feature characteristic of cardiac muscles include, well, they have striation just like skeletal muscle, but they are also have this branched pattern which skeletal muscles don't have. Okay. Additionally, they have these intercalated discs. Finally, they have generally only 1 to 2 nuclei per cell. Here, you don't see the nucleus for some of the cell because those nuclei have been cut out of the plane. They're out of the plane. That's why they appear to be gone. So uninucleated is the term. Uninucleated means having 1 nucleus per cell. Binucleated means that cell has 2 nuclei. Either way, this is elastic cartilage. You can see the elastic fibers, and really in reality, if you look at the elastic cartilage with hyaline cartilage without a special stain, elastic cartilage really just looks exactly like hyaline cartilage. But with the special stain, right, I'm not going to show you an image of elastic cartilage that isn't specially stained. So here you can see the elastic fibers in elastic cartilage, and these are chondrocytes in lacunae. These are actually perichondrium, but you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so this one is going to be pseudostratified columnar epithelium with cilia. You can see the nuclei occur at different levels. Okay, looking at the whole picture, and these are cilia. They're less uniform compared to microvilli. These are goblet cells secreting mucus. Okay, this is areolar connective tissue. Okay, so I mentioned elastic fibers, and then the thick ones are the collagen fibers. Here you can see mast cells, which you don't have to know how to identify. I just thought it's cool to pick up, to point out. Most of these are going to be fibroblast nuclei of fibroblasts. This one is simple cuboidal epithelium, simple squamous epithelium. You can see the little capillary closely associated with the air sacs. This is again from thyroid simple cuboidal epithelium. This one is loose areolar connective tissue with mast cells, fibroblast nuclei, collagen. Okay, these are collagen, and then these elastic fibers. This one is a motor neuron or multipolar neuron, and these are neuroglia or glial cells. Okay, and this is elastic tissue with the elastic fibers. This one is actually a muscular artery. It's a fairly thick artery. You can see why I want to show you is, well, first of all arteries and veins and all blood vessels and also heart, they all have an internal lining called the endothelium and endocardium respectively. So in the heart, the inner lining is called endocardium, as we'll learn in the next unit. This inner lining of all blood vessels is called endothelium, and it's a simple squamous epithelium. It's a single layer of squamous cell. It's hard to see in this image, but as they always tell us, histology requires some imagination. But I wanted to show you this because it's pretty cool. I like to see the blood cells in here, red blood cells, but also you can see the spindle-shaped. Well, you can't really see the margin of these cells. You only see the nuclei. But this is smooth muscle. Right? Smooth muscle. Okay. And then here we have adipose tissue. Adipocytes. This is reticular tissue, reticular connective tissue with reticular fibers. You can tell that these are reticular fibers because these are highly branched in contrast to elastic fibers. And most of these cells are lymphocytes. They are a type of immune cell. This is pseudostratified columnar epithelium with cilia, or ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Okay, you can see the nuclei occurring at different levels. Okay, so what am I looking at here? Well, here we can see the, this is actually a blood vessel. Okay, you can see the red blood cells in here. But what I wanted to show you is just this simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so this is a capillary. Okay, this is another picture showing neurons, multipolar neurons. So please put multipolar instead of just neurons. And then kind of faint here, you can see the glial cells. Okay, and this is likely the neuron's axon. This is stratified squamous epithelium. This is keratinized, but it's thin skin. Okay, you can see a tiny bit of keratin on top of this. This is fairly thin. What else can you see here? Well, these are the dermal papilla we talked about. So thin skin has a relatively thin stratum corneum. Okay, this is reticular tissue. This is thick skin. You can see the thick layer of stratum corneum up here. All this keratin. Okay. And then here you see the So these are the dermal papilla. Okay, with loose areolar tissue. Or you could just say areolar connective tissue, areolar CT, either is fine. This is dense irregular connective tissue, but the layer, right, if I ask you to identify a layer, that will be called the reticular dermis. If I ask you to identify the tissue, read the question, right? If I ask you to identify the tissue, this will be called dense irregular connective tissue. And most of this is all collagen. And you can see the fibroblast nuclei. And intermingle with that, you can see, well, this is a blood vessel. You can see another blood vessel here. You can kind of see the wall of that blood vessel, simple squamous epithelium. Okay. And then these are red blood cells. And then we've got other stuff going on here, probably nerves. Another blood vessel here. Those you don't have to worry about. Okay. So this is cardiac muscle. You see the intercalated discs, uninucleated cells with the branched pattern. You can't really make out the striation here. Oh, okay. So this is actually this spindle-shaped cells. These are smooth muscle cells. This is smooth muscle. This is smooth muscle. Well, why do they look so different? Well, imagine that these smooth muscle cells are long spindle-shaped. If you cut it across in its cross-section and then look at it from the side, it's going to appear like this. If you cut it longitudinally, it's going to be like this. So in many places, like your digestive tract, you have two layers of those smooth muscle. So when you cut the wall of those digestive tract, you're going to get this effect. One layer of smooth muscle running in this direction, another running in and out of the plane. Okay. Spindle shape. They are not striated, unlike skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle. This is cardiac muscle. You can see the striation here. This one is skeletal muscle, okay, with striation. This is cardiac muscle with striation. You probably want to mix this a bit better than I did. This is cardiac muscle with intercalated discs. Okay. Branched pattern, uninucleated or binucleated. Okay, so this is actually an eccrine gland, and this is thin skin. Okay, eccrine gland is a sweat gland, a type of sweat gland, and then this is thin skin. And we call that the thin layer of stratum corneum. And you can see that in contrast to sebaceous gland, which empties into the hair follicle, here the eccrine gland empties directly into onto the skin surface. Out and onto the skin surface. This is thick skin, the thick stratum corneum. This is a really close-up view of skeletal muscle. You can see the very well-defined striations, alternating bending pattern. And these are nuclei of the. So this is actually one cell, right? These are gigantic cells. This is one cell, and because they have merged during embryonic development, like hundreds of cells have merged to form one muscle cell. And for that reason, each of these cells have multiple nuclei. Okay, now this is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, this is the stuff you find on your subvertebral esophagus, anus, the genitalia, your penis, and vagina. Those are all lined. The wet mucosa. Okay. This is thin skin. Okay, so keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Remind you again, please read the question, because somehow, even though I keep reminding students, they always forget. Well, just, try to remember. Read the question. Alright, if I ask you, is this thin skin or thick skin? Don't go, oh, this is stratified squamous epithelium of keratinized type, right? That doesn't answer the question. Okay, so this is osseous tissue, okay, or bone tissue. Please don't say bone, because when you say bone, bone contains multiple types of tissues. Bone has vasculature, it's got nerves, it's got fat in there, it's got everything in there. Now, these are osteocytes in lacunae, okay, and they form rings. Okay, as we'll learn in lecture 4, these osteocytes, they kind of hold hands. Well, they don't really hold hands, but they're associated in these rings. These rings are known as lamella. And then these concentric rings of the lamella, along with the osteocytes in lacunae, together they form a structure called the osteon. Osteon, also known as the Haversian system. And then at the center of that, there's a canal called the central canal, and also called the Haversian canal. This one is actually simple columnar epithelium, as I mentioned in lecture. This one looks deceivingly like pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium, but it's actually simple columnar epithelium with microvilli. Okay. And then here we've got goblet cells. Okay. Well, why? How do I know? Well, just from having had the experience of looking at a lot of these. But also, you can tell the shape of their nuclei are approximately the same. You don't see like another layer of nuclei that with shape that's markedly different. So these are sort of the same shape of their nuclei, and you want to look at the whole the tissue as a whole, not just focus on where you see could be confusing. Okay. Another thing I want to note is that sometimes what you're seeing here could be just you're looking at a few layers of cells sort of stacked on top of one another, and so you're looking through cells over one another, and so it's possible that these are just nuclei that are in different planes. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, these are microvilli. You can see they're pretty uniform in contrast to the cilia, and these are goblet cells.